Hey bookworms, welcome to a royally enchanting bonus video in the world of Gretchen's misadventures. I'm thrilled to share not one but two short stories set before the magical chaos begins, along with an exclusive bonus illustration. Get ready to dive into political intrigue and dastardly deeds which set the scene for a Royal Froggy Problem. A Deal at the Swine and Claw. Nora took a sip of ale in the shadowy recesses of the Swine and Claw, waiting on her wizard associate to arrive. With the Baron up at the palace, Nora had been left to conduct his more clandestine business in the city. "Another?" Panna, the fawn waitress, asked. "Sure," Nora sighed. "Trust a wizard to keep a witch versed in hexes waiting." Panna laughed and leaned in close. "I hear his master has been giving him a hard time, in all sorts of trouble over unpaid debts, which he seeks magical solutions for." Nora chuckled. "If magic could conjure fortunes, the world would be a very different place." Panna only nodded and swayed on her cloven hooves back to the bar. It was something of a ritual, these meetings at the only tavern for magical types in the city. Nora did a good trade in secrets, and in return learned where she could acquire the more personal effects of those in the Baron's bad books, where a hex was required. A hooded form slid into the chair across from her, and Christoph pulled back his cowl. "Nora," he nodded. "I was starting to think you weren't coming," Nora huffed. "It's past bedtime for an old woman like me." Christoph smirked but remained silent as Panna returned with 2 mugs of ale. Nora thought it was likely prudent. Not much escaped the fawn's notice. "Now," Nora cleared her throat, "I'll need to know how I can get my hands on the toenails of Lord Walters." Christoph frowned into his mug. "What has that oaf done to insult the Baron?" Nora sighed. Insulting the Baron is one of his favourite pastimes, but ever since the incident at that shindig the Baron hosted, I heard it was spectacularly disgusting. He took a sip of ale. "You wouldn't have had anything to do with it, would you?" "Me?" Nora grinned. "Now why would you even ask?" The wizard shook his head and rubbed the bridge of his nose. "He keeps a strumpet in the city." "Lord Walters?" Nora leaned over the table. "That sounds promising. I'll have a note sent with the name." He curled his lip. "I try not to get overly familiar with the details. What do you intend to do with his toenails?" "Probably athlete's foot or something. Only persistent enough for him to know it was a hex and not rancid socks." "I'll never understand it." The wizard narrowed his eyes. "Why do you pursue such frivolous magic?" Nora pushed her spectacles up her nose. It wasn't the first time their conversations had veered into wild debates. At least it's honest. Every lord and lady in the kingdom knows that trifling with the Baron comes with uncomfortable afflictions, not like the whispers of people disappeared entirely. That there is unconscionable, and I wouldn't stand for it, even with the might of the Wizard Academy at my back. Christoph waved his hand, and his shoulder sagged. "Not tonight, Nora. I need more than information this time. I'm seeking an item to put my lord at ease. He fears for his life, and will not eat a bite unless I have studiously examined each and every meal." Nora frowned. The wizard looked exhausted. "So go see an alchemist. Toadstones aren't easy to come by, but they should be able to procure one." The wizard rubbed his eyes. "I have been explicitly instructed not to make this request known to the magical circles within the city. He fears his enemies would just find another way to do away with him." "So you want me to buy one for you?" Nora blinked. "I will recompense you for your time. 10% of the value of the stone itself." Nora sat back in her seat and folded her arms. 20. 15, he barked. Nora nodded slowly. Toadstones were valuable. 15% of their worth would be a tidy sum. "And if anyone hears of it," Christoph glared, "disappearing will be the least of your problems." The wizard stood and stalked out the back of the Swine and Claw, leaving Nora to consider the offer. It made sense he would seek her out rather than leaving the money with a person without magical talent. Those alchemists were slippery, and like as not would sell them a painted rock. She could either go to an alchemist herself, or see if she couldn't dredge up a giant toad on the Baron's lands herself. Sealed with a kiss. Sheena excused herself from the throne room and clutched the vial in her pocket. She hadn't seen her fiancé all evening, and the potion she had brewed was becoming less potent as time wore on. Although nerves danced in her belly, she was resolved to transform her future husband into something less formidable, leaving no opportunity for her father to marry her off elsewhere. The full moon illuminated the gardens, and she slipped through an open door under an arch heavy with the scent of jasmine. While warm, the absence of the scorching sun was a welcome relief. Her thoughts strayed as her silk slippers crunched on the gravel path, wondering if she would have time to prepare another dose before the morning meal. A giggle from the shadows drew her attention, and Sheena narrowed her eyes at the far wall of the garden. Taking a tentative step from the path to the soft lawn, she crept closer, already suspecting who she would find in a hasty embrace. Between the palm fronds concealing her presence, she curled her lip at the sight of her fiancé groping a young woman. A servant, most likely, who wouldn't dare refuse the lecherous pig. It was as though benevolent spirits had guided her here, giving her the opportunity to remedy his condition to something more fitting. Moving warily, she unstoppered the vial and dabbed droplets from her finger onto her plump lips. Careful not to ingest any, she hid the vial among the bushes and strode out toward the couple. "And what do we have here?" she pouted. "Am I not pleasing to His Royal Highness?" His back was turned to her, though she saw his body tense in the dim light. The girl pressed herself against the wall, seemingly terrified, and he unhanded her to spin on his heel. The mottled red of his cheeks had nothing to do with that of shame, and he glowered at the interruption. "What do you want, woman?" he sneered. Sheena flashed a smile and flickered her eyes toward the girl. "Leave us, harlot." The girl scampered away, and Sheena stepped closer to the prince. His fists clenched at his sides, and Sheena reached to smooth his richly embroidered silk shirt. "Come now, let me be the one to please you." His lip curled, but before he could refuse her, she stood on tiptoes to reach for his mouth, forming intent in her mind. When their lips locked, a crackle in the air prickled Sheena's neck, and her mouth twisted in a malevolent grin. She stepped backward as the prince began shrinking, his face already turning an alarming shade of green, his shocked expression distorting into an amphibian set of features. "Think you could see out your days with your boot planted on my head, husband?" Sheena hissed. "Your only dominion now will be that of stinking marshes and insects." His Highness, the frog, flicked his tongue from the bundle of clothes on the ground. Sheena drew her sleeve across her mouth before scooping the pile up and took a few deep breaths to collect herself. She knew what followed would be the performance of her life, and her fate would forever be in the balance. Leaving one slipper discarded, she pulled a pin from her hair and let out a piercing wail. "The prince!" she screamed. "Someone help! My fiancé has been hexed!" And finally, we have this bonus illustration from the talented Rod Savely. That wraps up our magical bonus bits for A Royal Froggy Problem. We hope you enjoyed the behind-the-scenes content. If you're hungry for more magical adventures and extra trimmings, don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and ring that notification bell. Until next time, may your days be filled with magic and merriment.